Good morning. We are live.
Morning.
I know it looks a little bit different this morning. I am without my partner in crime, my fabulous co-host, Miss Latoya Moore. She actually could not make it with us this morning, but she said the show must go on. So I'm going to do my best, y'all. I'm going to do my best and work with what I got. But she actually left a very special gift, if you will, in the form of our special guest this morning, who is none other than her sister. Miss Stephanie Worthon. So, how are you doing this morning, Stephanie?
I am doing well today. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. So, how has 2020 been treating you? I know we were asking people how are you quarantining, and now some people aren't necessarily quarantining, but it's still been an off the chain year from COVID to social injustice. We got elections coming up. So, how is 2020 treating you?
Yeah, 2020 has been a heavy year, like a very heavy year. I just feel like as soon as we kind of adjust and get settled into a new routine or a new normal, it all changes. So it has definitely kept me on my toes. But there's also been a lot of positives. Like I've had a lot of time to just be in my space and take some time to be introspective and relax and connect with family more, talk on the phone more. So there's positives, but definitely the negatives are there
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. And I think everyone actually has had to fight to find those positive moments in order to stay sane, honestly, which is really what we're going to be talking about today. So before we get into our topic, let me go ahead and read your incredible bio. We are so excited to have you. All right. So Stephanie grew up in Missouri before heading to college at Duke University. And after wrapping up her studies in cultural anthropology and global health, she moved to Austin, Texas, where she currently resides. She has worked for 3 major tech companies, wow, and is on a journey to empower underrepresented women to live the lives they're called to live by leading a Christ-centered life. Amen to that. She runs a small candle business called Unwind by Steph and lives indulging in all things self-care. Amen. We're going to talk about that today a little bit too. So when she's not making candles, you can catch her cuddled up on her couch watching a true crime documentary or whipping up all the carbs in her kitchen or out at brunch with friends. Yes, I love brunch, girl. Yes.
Brunch all day.
So give a warm welcome for our lovely special guest today, Miss Stephanie Worthon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I also have to give a special shout out to you because you were one of our faithful members of our book club that we hosted over the summer. So thank you so much for joining us for that. We really enjoyed your nuggets of wisdom and knowledge and you just coming along on this journey of personal self-discovery. So thank you for that. Really appreciate
Of
it.
course. It was super fun.
Yes. So let me actually pat myself. I feel a shine coming on. All right. Let's go ahead and dive into mental and emotional health. So, how would you define mental? We'll say mental health first, and then we'll go into emotional wellness. But how would you define mental wellness, and then emotional wellness?
Sure. And first, I'll just say that it looks different for everybody. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's no single path that you can use to define what that looks like. But for me, mental wellness, mental health is all about having a balanced life such that when life happens and you hit different waves in life, you know how to manage them in a productive and proactive way. And that you're able to kind of work through the different things that life throws at you. Yeah, so that's kind of how I would define it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think mental wellness is basically, it's honestly making sure that you have a regimen in place so that, like you said, when those waves do come, they don't completely throw you off guard. And sometimes it requires you to go back and dig up and address some things in order to, effectively move forward. And then once you even have done that, making sure that you have those safeguards in place because life is going to keep coming. It's going to keep, coming at us in different waves. And it's important for us to have certain things in place to make sure we have that inner fortitude, so that when it does hit us, I mean, yes, we all have challenges and we all will have challenges, but it does not have to completely throw us off, of the trajectory that God has for us. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
very, very good. How would you compare mental wellness to emotional wellness?
Sure. I think of mental awareness as more of like a long term situation, how you
Mhm,
engage with life, how you engage with people, and
mhm.
emotional wellness to be more so like you can go through a range of emotions throughout the day, throughout a week. If you're on your period, that might change. Your
That's true.
hormones might change your emotional wellness. But I think
Facts.
the difference for me is being able to manage the highs and lows as they come. Like being
Mhm,
able to say, I'm feeling, being first able to identify what you're feeling,
mhm,
because a lot of emotions are similar, they might be murky. And when in fact you might be feeling upset, you might just be hungry. So being able to first identify what you're feeling, why
mhm,
you're feeling it, and then how can you change that emotion. And if you can't change that emotion, being able to sit with that emotion, and being comfortable sitting in it. So I think for me,
mhm,
it's more so like present tense, whereas mental health is kind of like an overarching umbrella, and the
mhm,
emotions kind of sit underneath that. They definitely, emotions definitely drive your mental wellness, or they can, in
mhm.
some scenarios, but I kind of think of them as like layered.
That's very, very, very good. And I love that comparison as far as mental being, kind of how you perceive and relate to and process the outside world or what comes at you in life, and emotional really being how you deal with yourself, And if I'm honest, I feel like 2020 has definitely been an emotional wellness check for all of us, because we
Mm-hmm.
have experienced those, varying emotions from day to day, from hour to hour, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh God, you go from, okay, I'm going to be okay, to the world is going to come to an end. Like, what is going on here? And how do you navigate all of that inwardly? How do you manage all of that inwardly? How do you acknowledge all of that inwardly? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so many people have, I mean, it's been hard, quarantining and being isolated in some cases, working from home. Even we have a lot of people that are used to socializing with people and connecting with people, and don't necessarily know how to deal with themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I get it. We have some people that are more extroverted than others. So that really is a part of how you thrive and fuel and are nurtured as a person. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have some people that just don't like being by themselves because they don't want to deal with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think this year has really kind of forced us to put our finger on that and figure out, okay, like what are some areas in my life that I've been glossing over or sweeping under the rug, or ignoring, and at this time I really don't have anywhere to run. I have to deal with
Mm-hmm.
myself. So it's been an interesting year, but I think this year has brought all of that to the surface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think normally you get to choose what nature you want to be more towards. Like if you're leaning introvert, it's fine because you still have the choice.
Mhm,
And the same thing with being extroverted. A lot of extroverted people say, like, yeah, I'm fine being by myself, but I just don't have
mhm.
the choice to not be by
Yeah,
myself. So,
yeah.
I mean, I think that is definitely thrown a wrench in everyone's plans, just not feeling like you have control over being able to lean towards whatever nature you naturally lean towards.
It's true. It's true. It's forcing you to work a different muscle,
Absolutely.
whether you
Yeah.
like it or not. So, yeah. So we talked a little bit about the importance of mental and emotional wellness, but is there anything else that you want to add to why it's so important that we have that we incorporate mental and emotional wellness into our day-to-day lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also about just being prepared, right? Like
Mhm,
I kind of think about it as like going to the dentist, right? Like if you don't go and the more you prolong it, there's no way that you're going to have perfect teeth, right? And cavities don't happen overnight. In the same way,
mhm,
like emotional wellness and mental wellness doesn't deteriorate overnight, it doesn't get better overnight. And I
mhm,
think a lot of times we're so used to things being instantaneous, right? Like
mhm,
if I want something, I can order it, it'll be here in 2 days. Like I don't even have to go out to the grocery store, but that's kind of toxic when we think about the impact that this instantaneous gratification has on our mental and emotional wellness. So for
mhm,
me, it's really important to have that as part of your plan. because you never know when you can't predict the future. So you just never know when you're going to need the emotional wellness or mental and emotional wellness plan that you already have in place. You don't know when you're going to need to pull that out of your pocket. So I think in the same way that you prepare for any other aspects of wellness, whether it be going to the dentist, working out, going to see your doctor for regular check-ins, like mental health is equally, if not more important, because it dictates everything else in your life.
Absolutely. And just like, I mean, we can't overemphasize the importance of having that plan, or as I like to call it, a regimen in place where these are things that you do on a consistent basis. Now, granted, we know everybody has different seasons of life where they may be busier at other times more than others, or, they may be thriving versus, going through a tough traumatic time. So we get that life changes, but these should still be integrated in your life, and they may happen more frequently during certain seasons than others, but they should still be a part of your life, even when you feel like things are going great and you're like, I'm fine, life is great, I'm good. You still want to make sure that you have certain things in place. And so we will talk about what those specific things should be later on in the episode, but just the importance of making sure that it's integrated in your regular life on a consistent basis is so important. So let's talk about some of the consequences of not maintaining mental and emotional wellness. I mean, you said it. We live in a microwave society where everything, people want it now. They want the results now, and they look at other people's lives and they want to go and get that tomorrow. And it's like, first of all, you don't know what that person went through get there, good or bad, or just the discipline that it took, that they have been working at consistently. So, but let's talk about some of the consequences of not maintaining mental and emotional wellness.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's about not maintaining, and it's sometimes just about lack of education. Like maybe you've never had a point in your life where you felt like you were out of balance. So when you haven't felt that before, you may not feel a need for it. So I think it's the same kind of thing. Like I always joke, like my metabolism changed as I got older, and I just had to like adapt. I didn't know this was coming. Maybe people told me, I ignored them because it was never my reality. So one of the consequences can be that if you don't have that plan in place, you may not be able to cope as well as you may have assumed that you would. It's really easy to be like, yeah, things happen and this is how I normally cope. But I think there's a really big difference between like everyday stressors. So, oh, my phone is dying, I'm running late to a meeting, there's bad traffic. Like you can very easily cope to those things. And they may be incredibly stressful in the moment, but it's not to a point where, hopefully it's not to a point where, your entire week is going to be thrown off, or, what have you. But those types of stressors are different than whenever things get out of balance mentally and emotionally. And so if you don't have that, then ultimately you won't be able to pour into yourself. And then also you won't be able to maintain relationships that you want to be able to maintain. You won't be feeling good. And that might spill over into the physical wellness that you have. Stress can physically make you sick. You may gain or lose weight. It really just depends. And you might just find yourself after a while not knowing how to climb out of this space that you've gotten yourself into.
Stephanie, you've touched on a wide range of things, from anxiety. Seriously, this is great stuff, like anxiety, stress, and then the physical toll that it takes on you, depression, the physical toll that it takes on you. I don't think people fully grasp, like it's connected. Everything is connected, and like you were saying, it could show up in, you going up and down in your weight or hair loss, but I believe that a lot of the diseases that we deal with too are in some cases connected to, our mental, emotional, and even spiritual welfare. And so, really taking the time to look at all of that and figure out like, okay, are there strange relationships in my life where I need to, make amends, where I need to make restoration? Are there, Are there people that I need to forgive? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness is a huge thing. I feel like we can do a whole episode just on forgiveness alone.
Absolutely.
You know, when you withhold forgiveness, it doesn't impact the person that you're not forgiving. It impacts you, you know, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And so just realizing how all of these things are connected. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, because it's a lot of consequences to it that we don't even realize, you know, and even just in the day to day, you know, we don't have to go from day to day feeling scatterbrained. We don't have to go from day to day feeling like, okay, what day is it? What time is it? What am I focusing on? Like, we can have margin in our lives. It's okay to not run around like a chicken with your head cut off all the time. You know, like, trust me, you will still be just as valued and just as loved if you're actually calm and at peace and actually have space in your day, so that you're not going from one thing to the next thing. You know, I think we wear stress and busyness like a badge, you know, a badge of honor. Like, look at me. And it's like, okay, you over there going crazy, you know, when you don't have to. And I get it. We will have busy moments in our lives, but that should be the exception and not the rule, not the norm.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, very, very important. All right. So, Stephanie, let's talk a little bit about your personal story. Can you share with us about like your upbringing, your childhood, you know, just a little bit about yourself? And I know, disclaimer, teaser, we might get a little bit of dirt on our co-host Toya here, but just share a little bit about your childhood and your upbringing, please.
Yeah, I won't share any dirt. I'm still scared of her, even though she lives a few
Your
states
sister
away.
will come. She will come for you. We got you. We got you. Good looking out.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I had, it's hard to say, but from my perspective, I think I had a fairly normal childhood. You know, I grew up in a two parent household, so two incomes as well, both working parents. There were times where education was like the biggest emphasis. And then it would also be another emphasis on like health and working out and playing sports and what have you. But I think there was also a lot of respect around different interests. So I have, as Toya has probably mentioned before, we've got a pretty big family. So some of our siblings were more interested in things like speech and debate, and some of them were more interested in music. And, I think our parents definitely encouraged us to have that individuality. I don't necessarily remember feeling like I had waves of ups and downs. So I think for the most part, it was just a normal, or what I would say was a pretty normal childhood. But the caveat I'll say here is that, a lot of psychologists talk about how a lot of trauma happens in childhood, no matter how sheltered your parents will try to make your life, or, how good your childhood may be, you will still have things that impact you later on in life. And so as an adult, I like think back on habits that I built as a child, some of which might just be like being in my room. Like that was my safe space. Like whenever I wanted to get away from people, if I was in a bad mood, or if one of my siblings was being mean or bullying or whatever, like my room was my safe space. Like that's where I felt comfortable. I knew that it was like, my particular space, and that's still something that rings true today. So it's the same thing. Like even though I live by myself, my room is still my safe space. Like so things like that kind of influence different parts of your childhood, influence the ways in which you think about how you cope mentally and emotionally. And I think that one's a big one for me. But yeah, I had a pretty normal upbringing. And I would say, I don't know.
That's great though. That's great. So talk about the transition from your teenage years to adulthood, going off to college. You actually moved away from your family and went to Duke. What was that transition like? And then of course, after college, coming into the real world per se, how was that for you?
Yeah, I think the transition to college was okay. I think I struggled with loneliness a lot when I went to college because I grew up in such a big family and I didn't have a roommate or anything that first year in school. As someone who's like naturally introverted and like really hates like surface level conversations and just small talk, that transition was like really rough. Like I don't want to know your favorite color. I want to know like what are things that make you tick, right? Like I want to know like you know, how do you like to spend your Friday nights? So I think that transition was a little rough, but once I kind of found my group and, you know, kind of found the classes that I was interested in and the
Mhm.
things that I wanted to study, it became more comfortable.
Mhm.
But I think one thing about being at Duke is it's hard to manage being in college at a really elite school
Mm.
where grades matter. So,
Mm.
and this isn't just Duke, this is a lot of colleges that
Oh
are like
yeah.
in this elite, you know, kind of competitive
Yeah.
atmosphere. You know, there are so many, there are like a lot of times in a lot of classes there are only so many people who are going to be at the top, and
Mhm.
so I think I developed these habits of, you know, they kind of phrase it as work hard play hard, but ultimately what that turns into is creating these habits where you push yourself and you push yourself and then you don't get a break until it's winter. So you've been, you know, pulling all nighters, you've been, you know, eating pizza nonstop or skipping food or, you know, what have you. And then on top of that, I was also working a lot. College
Oh
was really
wow.
expensive for me. I consistently worked 2 or 3 jobs.
Girl.
Um, so I think that's another thing to point out. Like my college experience is a little bit different because
Yeah.
on top of, you know, kids could spend 4 hours in the library studying. I had to not only spend those 4 hours studying, but I had to do it after work, right? So then
Mhm.
you start losing sleep, you start, you know, but that becomes your norm, right? Like kind of how we
Mhm.
talked about this notion of busyness and constantly being like busy with something,
Yeah.
but then also trying to manage the social aspect of it, right? Because
Oh
college
my
is supposed
goodness.
to be fun, you know, all of these things. But ultimately, what that ends up doing is building these really bad habits where you don't actually take time to check on yourself emotionally or mentally. You just kind of like glaze over it and you're like, well,
Mhm.
everybody's stressed. Well,
Mhm.
everybody's, you know, it's finals. Of course you're stressed.
Yeah.
So I think the transition was okay, but it was more so not necessarily having the best skills or even the best environment
Mhm.
that really prioritize mental and emotional wellness. So that was what I would say made college a little bit difficult.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And you actually kind of lead into my next question, like when did you start to experience challenges in your mental and emotional health? So would you say it was around college or after or what?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I didn't, it wasn't until like, you know, hindsight's 2020. I thought
Mhm.
college was completely normal. And then
Mhm.
as I started to like really unpack what my college experience was, what
Mm.
things I had normalized, it wasn't until then that I think back and I'm like, wow, there are so many things that were really bad and unhealthy habits that I picked up that I didn't want to carry over
Mhm.
into adulthood.
Mhm.
So there's this phenomenon that has become super popularized where we talk about burnout. And I think that's what happened. I was running this race starting in high school of like, how can I get the best test scores? You know, I
Mhm.
did the International Baccalaureate program, which for anyone, it's very similar to the AP program, but it's a
Mhm.
little bit more college focused. So you essentially write like a mini dissertation.
Wow.
After I had graduated high school, I still had to go and take my exams for the IB program. So it's just like you're constantly on because you're trying to get into an elite school. And then once you're there, you're trying to still be the best and you're surrounded by the best of the best. So you're still running a sprint essentially from probably my junior year of high school all the way through college. And then after that, when I transitioned to working life, it still felt like I was running a sprint, right? Like I wanted to be the best in my work, but I just was at a point where I was not enjoying life. Like I was trying to fill my life with things like travel or, you know, going to happy hours and trying to be super social. And I had kind of pivoted away to the things I knew in my childhood, which is that I was naturally introverted. The things that I like to do, like
Mhm.
reading, had become more stressful, right? Like it wasn't like I was
Mhm.
reading for fun. It was like I was reading because I really wanted to, like, you know, do well in an exam
Yeah.
or what have you. So those things that I had tended to draw near to as a child, I had just kind of pushed off my plate, or they had become more of a burden than anything else.
Mhm.
And so I think probably about 2 years and after college is when I finally took some time to slow down.
Okay.
And I was like, you know, work is stressing me out, but I'm also just feeling this long, probably, you know, almost 10 years of burnout, the effects of the
Mm.
burnout. So it took me a while to get to a point where I was like, okay, something's out of whack here because I had normalized so many bad habits that everything felt fine for a really long time.
Wow, that I'm resonating with so much of what you're saying, because you hit, especially when you are already a high performing person, if it's student wise, or just in other areas of like extracurricular activities or what have you. When you are already a high performing individual, it's like the bar just continues to be elevated higher and higher
Mm-hmm.
and higher, and you continue to strive to to reach that bar, to surpass that bar, which in essence is not, conceptually I should say, is not a bad thing, because you want to be ever evolving and ever growing. But when you look at what it can be at the expense of at times, we
Mm-hmm.
don't always look at that, and we don't always know how to have that healthy drive while still having boundaries in our lives, as it relates to just the basics like diet, exercise, and sleep. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
those are
Mm-hmm.
basic things that we will surpass on, and for a prolonged period, to get results that we need, without realizing I actually need these in order to like live, like in
Mm-hmm.
order to
Mm-hmm.
sustain myself. So that's, yeah, you're bringing up some very important points here, and I totally identify with your journey. Can you tell me what was the wall that you hit that made you like stop and be like, okay, I have to take a minute, like something isn't right here?
Yeah, I think when people talk about their journeys, people always assume that it was like one thing that was like, this was my trigger, or like this
Hmm.
was my breaking point. But I think for
Hmm.
me, it was like several small things.
Okay.
Um, Similar to how a lot of people feel about 2020. Like when we think about the small things, like wearing a mask is not that bad, but like
Mhm.
as you layer on the other things over a long extended amount of time is what makes
Yeah.
it difficult, and I think
Yeah.
that's what it was for me. So
True.
I just wasn't, I had built these really bad sleep habits, so I didn't have like a healthy sleep schedule.
Hmm.
I had been super active in college and high school. I was not like the star athlete by any means, but I still did a really good job of taking care of my health and like making, you walk a lot when you're on Duke's campus because it's really big. But
Hmm.
I also took different classes. So I took like cycling classes and
Hmm.
yoga, and, I danced my whole life. So I did dance classes when I was there.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
those types of things I wasn't intentional about as I transitioned out of college. Those things were just offered to me, and I didn't think
Hmm.
of them as taking care of my like physical health. And so as I stopped doing those things, as I stopped, having a regular sleep schedule and
Hmm.
taking care of my like, physical fitness and those types of things, those were underneath the surface of things that also happen in life. Your relationships change, your friendships change. You may be in a job that you didn't like, which was the case for me. Like it was a cool job, but I wasn't feeling fulfilled. I wasn't feeling like I was moving to the next step. And so I
Hmm.
just kind of felt stagnant in those areas. But the thing that made me, or the thing that was really weird, was that I couldn't pinpoint something that was making me feel this way, right? Like I
Hmm.
would think and be like, why don't I feel quote unquote happy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um I have a job, I have an apartment, I live in a cool city, I have great friends, but it was all of these underlying surface issues. And
Mm.
so those kind of were always there in the background. But then as I moved throughout, and continued to grow in my career, I was getting elevated in my career. I had changed jobs, but I still hadn't achieved this level of like peace that I
Wow.
was hoping for or
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah.
And so, as those things are underneath the surface, then other life events start happening. So, then I'm having to put down my dog. I'm at
Mhm.
this job that I love, and I'm getting let go from my job as 2020 hits. And so all of these things are kind of happening simultaneously, but I wouldn't say it was like one specific event. I
Gotcha.
just got to a point where I felt like I was swimming in stress. Like I
Mhm.
never felt relaxed. It didn't matter if I'd like, gone through my entire to-do list, if I had worked out, I still felt stressed, and I just felt like I couldn't get out of a state of stress.
Mm.
So I think as I reflect on it, it was all of those elements, but at the time I had no idea what it was like, because I had been used to managing all of these things, but I
Yeah.
hadn't taken a step back to say like, okay, there's some things that I need to take off of my plate, um, because I had been so used to it. So it was more of like a long term thing
Gotcha.
than one specific. Yeah.
Yeah, but you bring up a very important indicator where it's like, okay, I've achieved all these things. I have all these incredible accolades and successes in my life, and I am still not happy. I think that's
Hmm.
an incredible point of indication to make and for people to use as a red flag where it's like, okay, you know, I did what I said I wanted to do. I achieved what I said I wanted to achieve. I have what I've always wanted, but I'm still not happy. Why is that? That should be something we really all pay attention to, and really take time to figure out why is that, because it could be different for all of us, once we start doing the digging. But it's important to do the digging. So,
Hmm.
for you, what steps did it take? What steps did you take to do that digging, if you will, and to figure out, okay, this needs to change, or this has to go, or this needs to be improved. What steps did you take to address your mental and emotional wellness?
Yeah, I think it's so funny. Like I am the biggest person who like loves deals, coupons, all of the above. If your insurance offers it, I'm gonna be there, like what have you.
Mhm.
And so it was crazy to me that I'd never realized that I had therapy as part of my benefits because I never thought that I needed therapy. Like I thought that I was managing everything fine. I thought
Yep.
like, oh, this is just like normal. So once I realized I had it as a benefit, I made an appointment and I was like, why not? Like, what could it hurt? And then once I was actually in the office, I'd actually identified a provider that I liked working with. That's when I realized, okay, I actually really need to be here. And so it was two things. It felt really good to take that first step, but then it felt even better to realize how good it felt introspectively to be able to talk about some of the things that were going on in my life, not to a friend, not to a family member, but to a third person who didn't have a perspective of me, who had no interest or care in judging me, but who was actually there to help me. And so it just felt like a conversation, which was something that really ended up helping me in the long run.
Very good. Now, okay, you just stepped on a landmine when it comes to, I would say Black people in particular, therapy. Do we
Mm-hmm.
do therapy? I mean, I'm saying we got Jesus. We're women of God. Do we do therapy, Stephanie? Like, tell us why that's important. And did you have any qualms about seeing a therapist? Like, did you have any mental stigmas in your mind pre-existing regarding seeing a therapist, or was it just like I needed to see somebody? I'm gonna go see somebody.
um, I will say that I think what has been really awesome about my generation is that I feel like therapy has become fairly normalized. And I try to do what I can to normalize it as well.
Mhm.
Um, but I think in terms of like if it was a tough or easy decision, I think because of the state I was in, because I was so stressed, it felt like more stress. Like, oh my gosh, I have to like go through these providers. I like need to read the reviews. I want to see
Yeah.
like what their therapy practice is. And I
Yeah.
just didn't feel like doing anything additional because I was already so stressed out.
Real.
So I wasn't necessarily like worried about the barrier of like, what does it mean to go to therapy? I was more so
Mhm.
worried about like, now I've got to add something else like to my plate.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a different challenge for me in that sense. But
Mhm.
I didn't really have like, I guess as a person, I'm not always super worried about telling people things in my life. So I
Mhm.
also was of the perspective like people don't need to know I'm in therapy if I don't want to share that.
Mhm.
And so that was kind of how I felt. Like that is your
Mhm.
own journey, and you don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't have to explain to people what you're doing. Like
Yeah.
just do what's good for you, and then if you want to share that, then that's cool too. But if not, that's your journey.
That's good. Let me ask you, as a Christian, did you feel like, why do I need therapy if I have Jesus? Like, did you feel like you were almost failing as a Christian because needed to see a therapist instead of just pray it away, so to speak?
I actually felt the opposite because I felt
Mm.
like when I was in a state of stress and when what I was carrying felt so heavy, my relationship with God was also deteriorating. Not only did I
Mhm.
not feel like doing anything, I didn't even feel like talking to God. Like I felt
Wow.
like, well, you already know how I feel today. Is how I felt. And so I felt almost like it was to a point where if I didn't fix it, then my relationship not only with other people, but my relationship with God was going to be stagnant. And I felt like I owed it to myself to try anything that I could to be in a place where, I could maximize the life that God had given me, whether it just be, I tried, I did what I could. And I think for me, a large part of Christianity is simply that you did what you could. You knew what options you had, and you did the best you could to, given all the information, to honor God in a way that made sense for you and your relationship with him. And I felt like I had the options there. And if I didn't go, then I wasn't being, it wasn't about like this time frame, right? Like I wasn't like pushing myself to go. It was that when I was in a place where I felt ready to seek therapy, to seek understanding, to do some healing, that prayer is a weapon, but like I needed some tools to get to a place where I could feel comfortable being in prayer, where I could feel comfortable doing more than having these surface level conversations with God. And it took actually me being in therapy to realize that like God can handle whatever emotions you have. God isn't like an emotionless person or being, rather. So I needed therapy to help my relationship with Christ.
That's amazing. I think you need to say that last sentence one more time, please.
I don't even know what I said.
I'll say it for you.
I
needed therapy to help me with my relationship with Christ. Lord Jesus, that's really good. That's really good. Oh my gosh. Wow. I don't think we often look at it that way. Like therapy is a tool, or can be a tool to help us in our relationship with Christ. Like that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Are there any other steps that you took to address your mental and emotional wellness?
I mean, I think once I got in therapy, I really started building what we talked about at the beginning, which was like an overall wellness plan. Like once I could start thinking about the things that I needed to do to get back to a place of mental and emotional balance, then I also realized there were other things that I needed to incorporate as well. And what I really liked about being in therapy is thinking about it as a journey, as opposed to saying, everything has a time period. And I think that was tough because, high school is 4 years, college is 4 years, you have a calendar year, even when you're at work.
Yeah.
So realizing, things are not linear. Like when you're ready and you feel like being more active, or you feel like eating healthier, like it will come. So just trying not to force those things was something that was really important to me. And I found that when I incorporated other tools of self-reflection, so for me, that looked like journaling, that looked like meditating, that looked like taking and setting boundaries with when I was or when I wasn't going to engage with certain people. It looks like setting boundaries with work and saying, these are my hours. If you are going to require that I work on weekends or what have you, like I will be logging overtime or I won't do it. Like, just setting those boundaries became easier because I knew what the payoff would look like. So for me, it was a lot of those tools and a lot of self-reflection in that as well, because every day is not going to look like progress. So having some self-compassion as well is really important. And I think it's something that a lot of us don't have, because when we don't make progress towards a goal, it might look like failure, but in fact, it's just part of the process. Like people are not perfect. That's why we're all human. And so for me, just finding ways to cope when things didn't go well was something that was a really big deal. So, for me, that turned into candles. When I needed a break, I knew that I could light a candle and sit and relax. And so that's kind of how my business was birthed. Just finding your own coping tools and whatever that looks like, and having that plan in place. Like, okay, when I'm having a bad day, this is the routine that I'm going to go through. I'm going to light a candle. I'm going to take a bath. I'm going to journal. I'm going to watch a Netflix show, whatever it is. But just being super intentional about that was part of the process that helped, complement therapy as well.
Ooh, this is so good, Stephanie. Like, I feel like I'm trying to unpack everything you just said. Like, okay, first of all, that realizing that not everything in life is linear. Like there is not an order to everything, and I know it's hard for us as humans, to fathom that at times, but reminding ourselves that God stands outside of time. Time is just a tool that he uses, honestly, to keep us in line, honestly. And he can do whatever he wants, in and outside of the confines of time. But as we look at our own journeys, as we look at our own processes and steps that we're taking, not realizing that, you know, everything is going to happen in a certain order, you know, and I will say too, realizing that, you know, it's really about the journey and less about the destination. You know, like the more that we allow ourselves to embrace the journey, the more that we're able to, you know, embrace mental and emotional wellness. So I think a lot of mental and emotional wellness has to do with being willing to acknowledge, embrace, and sit in the moments that we have in life, whether they are good, bad, or just downright ugly. Like really being able to sit in those moments and be like, okay, well, God, what do you want to show me in this moment? What are you trying to teach me? How do you want me to change? What do you want me to get from this moment, instead of just trying to push past it or push through it to the next thing? So linear, the light, that not everything in life is linear. That's a great point. You talked about adjustments that you made, you know, in your own personal schedule, as far as what you put in your body, you know, how you treat your body, you know, taking time to care for your body, you know, again, that food, diet, exercise, and sleep, those are important things, you know, protecting your time with God, your relationships, assessing those relationships and seeing, okay, do any of these need to change, or any of these, you know, toxic for me, or any of these relationships malnourished, meaning am I not giving enough time and attention to them, or what have you. So assessing that is important. You talked about your job, which I think is a challenge for a lot of people, because we feel like if we put any type of boundaries in place in our jobs or on our careers, then we will experience retaliation. You know, we won't be promoted, or we may lose our job, or what have you. And so really that whole game of mental gymnastics that we play with ourselves, where it's like, if I don't always say yes, then I won't be able to move forward. Can you talk a little bit about, you said a little bit about it, like realizing, when you realize the payoff, it helps you to put those boundaries in place. But can you talk a little bit about the process that you had to go through in order to really put those boundaries in place from a work and a career stance? Because I think for a lot of people, that's a real challenge and a real fear,
Yeah,
honestly.
I think so too. And I think especially like underrepresented folks in the workplace, particularly women of color, Black women specifically, you
Yeah,
always feel like you need to be doing more. Or if you
absolutely.
ever say no, you're going to be kind of put at the back of the list.
Yep.
Right. And so I had those internal feelings and notions as well. But what I realized is that, like, if I truly have faith, when I set boundaries that are ultimately honoring God. So if I set a boundary so that I can feel rested,
Mm-hmm.
then feeling rested allows me to have a really positive relationship with Christ.
Mm-hmm.
It is not it's not God's will for our lives to constantly feel exhausted.
Amen.
So when we think about it at a larger picture, if work is causing me, to a point where it's not, no one is ever going to feel 100% at work.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean instead is that if it's becoming to a point where it's overwhelming, then
Mm-hmm.
that, you setting those boundaries and saying no, if it puts you at the back of the line, then God will put you where you need to be. Like it's not
Amen.
about us ultimately trying to control every little factor in our life. And it may not look like what we want. You may lose your
Mm-hmm.
job. You may be out of work for a little bit. But I think ultimately, when you prioritize what needs to be prioritized with
Mm-hmm.
regards to your mental and emotional wellness, with regards to your relationship with Christ, then God will position you where He wants you to be. And sometimes that's harder for us than to, put ourselves in the position that we want to be. So I think when you come to that place, you have to make a decision. Like, it may not be the right choice for you right now. That might not be
Mm-hmm.
your season. But whenever I was able to set those boundaries, at least, it actually ended up working out for me. Even though it may have looked like it wasn't at the time, those small boundaries ended up having a huge payoff.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's over time going to be even more of a choice that I'm proud of. But I think doing it early on in my career has definitely helped. And that's not to say I'll like never work on weekends or what have you, but there's just always boundaries there.
Very good. Very, very good. And you said two key things. I mean, of course, first and foremost, as women of faith, we trust God and we believe that, he determines our income, regardless of what job we have, regardless of whether or not we have a job, and he determines our increase. And so we, at the end of the day, have to trust him in that regard. But then also too, you talked about when you do put boundaries in place and put yourself and make yourself a priority, it allows your productivity to go up. I know for me it does. When I get enough rest, I'm percolating. My thoughts and ideas are coming to me, and I'm able to do what I would normally do in a shorter amount of time. Honestly, I'm much more efficient. And even when I do hit walls in my in my job or in my work where I can't think of something, or I can't figure out how to solve something, or I can't figure out how to approach something, oftentimes it takes me stepping away, maybe going out for a quick walk, maybe even just, grabbing a snack, drinking some water, getting up and stretching, where by the time I do that, I'm able to come back and have a fresher perspective. So all of those things, I don't think we realize when we put them in place, they actually help us to become more effective at what we do and more productive at what we do. So it really becomes a win-win. I know at one point I used to tell people, I take a Sabbath for me, but I also take it for you. I do. And at that time I was saying it because, I have an attitude, and I'm very irritable and difficult to work with when I'm not putting margin in my life, so I was saying it in that regard, like, you don't want to deal with me when I have an attitude or when I'm, feeling a certain type of way. But also too, from a level of productivity, I take it for you. I step away and take care of myself and do what I need to for you as well, because the outcome is a greater quality, when I do that. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. And I think even Christ modeled this, like when Jesus was here, he took time away. Like there are so many times where we see God taking time away. So he went to the mountains by himself, like even he needed time away. And so I think if we model a life after the life that Jesus lived while he was on earth, then that is one of the most important things, like taking time away. You can't always be on. It's not good. You'll be burned out. So even just taking time away, I think is part of something that you should put in your plan for mental and emotional wellness.
Yeah. And it's trusting God at the end of the day, because, we don't run this world. I know we like to think we do, but guess what? It will still be intact. If if you step away at 5 o'clock or take the weekend off, or have a Sabbath or go on vacation, guess what? Life will still keep going, and we will be just fine, and you will be better for it. So very, very good. So today, how does mental and emotional wellness look for you? Like where are you on your journey?
Yeah, I think in my journey right now where I am is in a place where I know what healthy looks like. And so I think previously I didn't know what it felt like to not be stressed or to not feel burnout. And so now that I'm in a place where I know what that feels like, when I do get overly stressed or when I do feel burned out, I can first identify that it shouldn't feel like this. And then I have the plan in place to know how to get back to that. So, I think what we talked about a lot about is being consistent, which is like, I think there's this big conception of consistent. That means like every single day, you can't miss a day. There won't be times where, you have to alter your schedule or what have you. But I don't think of consistency in that way. I think of it as in consistency, meaning when I mess up, I know how to get myself back on. And I can stay on. So I think when I think about what that looks like, I don't know that every person's therapy plan is to be in therapy forever. But I think one of the things that really helped me when I started therapy is my therapist said that the end goal of therapy is that you will leave having the tools you need to have to manage what life throws. So I still to this day use a lot of the tools that I learned in therapy. And it's really great because then you can evangelize those tools. I have a friend who I talk about therapy regularly with my friends. A lot of us go. One of her assignments was to watch the Disney movie Inside Out.
Oh, wow. I love it.
So good. It's so good. And so, I mean, just things like that. So whenever you are having, a down day or you're not feeling your best, you know that you can put Inside Out on, like little things like that that you probably would never think of, and learning how to take care of yourself so that when the opportunity arises, for you to present your best self, you'll know how to do it in a healthy way. And that has very much so been my journey. I think, life happens. Like I'm not, um, perfect. And so when things are really stressful, I know really quick 5-minute things I can do to de-stress. Or, when things are overwhelming at work, I know how to manage them. Whereas before, I would work through them, but not really be
Mhm.
able to manage them underlying emotions. Like I would close my computer and still feel the stress of a 2 o'clock meeting. But now I know how to not do that. And that's kind of where I am in my journey.
Very good, very good. Well, you kind of actually helped us transition. I know as we wrap up, we're going to be talking about just ways you can address and monitor your mental and emotional wellness. So, can you share some signs that either you personally may experience, or that you can help other people to pinpoint that they may be experiencing, stress, anxiety, or even depression?
Yeah, I think again, like you mentioned, it kind of varies for everyone.
Mhm.
Some of the telltale signs for me were never feeling relaxed, like
Mhm.
constantly feeling on,
Mhm.
um, not wanting to get out of bed,
Mhm.
not because you don't want to get out of bed, but because you simply have no energy to.
Mhm.
So feeling like your energy is kind of out of whack,
Mhm.
and that could mean high or low. Weight change, that's a really big one. Weight fluctuates all the time, but not really knowing why or like the root of it. It
Mhm.
could be that things are a little bit out of balance, because your eating habits have changed, or your
Mhm.
physical fitness habits have changed. And I think for me, maybe just feeling not like just feeling not yourself.
Yeah.
Um, and so that could be, it could be a number of things. But for me, those were some of the telltale signs. And when I start feeling like that, then that's when I know, okay, I need to revert back to my wellness plan.
Gotcha.
So for me, those are some of the things.
Very good. And I would also say, feeling overwhelmed for me is a sign. Feeling like, okay, this is a lot going on. I usually have to remind myself in those moments to focus on one thing at a time. I used to
Hmm.
pride myself on being a multitasker, until I realized I was not good at multitasking, or should I say, somebody told me I wasn't good at multitasking. But I mean, at the end of the day, I can, just because I'm getting multiple things done at the same time doesn't mean they're at the level of quality that they need to be or that they should be. So,
Hmm.
realizing I do better when I focus on one thing at a time. And then too, I, for me, a sign is when you feel like life is just kind of in a haze or a blur, and you're not able to
Hmm.
be present. I think that's an incredible thing to pay attention to as well. So, very, very good tips. We talked a little bit about this, but are there any other things that you think prevent women, I'll say Black women in particular, from addressing mental and emotional wellness or health?
Yeah, I think beyond just the stigma of therapy, one of the
Mhm.
other really big barriers is cost. Therapy can be very expensive.
Mhm.
And so I would just encourage you, if that is a barrier for you, to look
Mhm.
at other options. There's a lot of ways that you can start your journey. It doesn't necessarily have to start with therapy. I think there's a lot of free resources online, self
Mhm.
guided journaling. There's a lot of
Mhm.
podcasts with certified therapists that will
Mhm.
walk through different topics. And
Mhm.
while it may not be necessarily personalized, I still find myself walking away with nuggets that I can apply throughout the week.
Mhm.
So I think starting your journey somewhere will
Mhm.
help you. And then as you become more hip to some of the other options that are available in your area, so whether that be, there's a lot of resources, one of which is like this network called Black, what is it, Therapy for Black Girls. They have a resource list of providers that are doing specifically related to COVID, but free therapy sessions or reduced cost therapy sessions. So if that is where you are in your journey and you're looking for it and cost is a barrier, I encourage you to just look up resources that might be able to accommodate your lifestyle. And then also, check your insurance, see what it does offer if you have insurance. But I think those are the two ones that I hear the most, and perhaps just feeling like therapy won't work. But you won't know until you try. So therapy, may not be for everyone. And I don't think there's like a one size fit all bill for mental and emotional wellness, but try something, I think, is the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's very good. And you mentioned, like you were saying, you didn't realize that your insurance at the time covered your therapy. And so oftentimes we, just haven't done the research to say, hey, does my insurance cover this or a certain number of sessions? And then now, given the climate that we're in with COVID, a lot of companies are providing free therapy sessions or other resources for their employees, because they realize like this is a very trying time. So really try to take advantage of that. If you're fortunate enough to still be working, to have benefits right now, look at that. Definitely check out therapy for Black girls, like what you were sharing. Like you said, there are a lot of great podcasts out there that can provide tips and tools as well. Guided journaling is an excellent thing. Journaling has been an integral part of my life, gosh, since I want to say, middle school on up to now, present day. And I haven't always done it consistently, but I have done it. And so just making sure that that is something that you look at, that is something that you do, because it's really, really important. And so let me see. I want to make sure. Oh, the other area that I was going to talk about for what prevents Black women in particular from addressing their mental and emotional health. I always have to talk about the stigma of being a strong Black woman. I think oftentimes we don't feel like we have the luxury to really take the time that we need to address our mental and emotional health, because we're holding everything else together. We're holding our families together. We're holding our homes together. We're trying to succeed in whatever we put our hands to. And we don't necessarily feel like we can take the time we need to focus on ourselves, to care for ourselves, and to really deal with whatever we need to inwardly. So I think that's another reason that a lot of Black women in particular don't take time to address their mental and emotional health. But again, I have learned that when you do invest in yourself in that regard, it helps the people around you that much more, because you're able to give from a place of abundance and surplus, and not from a place of deficit, which is imperative. So yeah. Anything else you want to share on that?
No, I think that's good.
Awesome. And you talked about steps you can take to address your mental health. So we already talked about that. And then you also talked about too, how you regularly monitor your mental and emotional health. But can you share, I know you referenced a couple of tools or quick exercises that you can do when you do kind of feel a little off kilter. Can you give a couple examples or share a couple of those tools or exercises?
Yeah. So there's two that I rely on regularly. One is this really easy breathing technique. And all it is you breathe out for longer than you breathe in. So essentially it's a technique where, for example, you breathe in for 4 seconds and then you breathe out for 5 or 6, and it just slows down your breathing, and it actually helps you feel phenomenal. So that's one that I use. Another one is humming. So there's a lot of there's a whole body of research around this that talks about how humming is super calming. So when you're feeling stressed, you might just get some steps in and hum to yourself. This is like there's no psychological research behind this, but I like to have dance parties. So when I'm feeling really down, I literally get up and move your body. There's something about physically moving your body until you feel something different than what you're currently feeling that can really change your emotional state. And so that might like look different for you. If you don't have the energy to go on a walk, or if it's too hot, or you just don't feel like it, you don't have the time, just get up and like have a dance break for a few minutes, walk around for 5 minutes, whatever that looks like. Physically moving my body helps a lot. So those are tools that I use.
Very, very good stuff, you all. This has been awesome. This has been really awesome. Anything you want to share in closing before we transition?
No, I mean, I would say, first of all, these conversations are really important. Do your best if you can to normalize conversations amongst your friends, amongst your family. around therapy, so that, you know, they are aware that it's not something that's stigmatized, but actually encouraged.
Mhm.
And then I would just encourage you to ask yourself, what is one thing I can do this week to better support myself or better take care of myself? And continue to ask yourself that on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and be honest and have compassion toward yourself as well.
Very good. Have compassion for yourself. I like to say, give yourself grace. Like, really,
Mm-hmm.
you're not perfect. None of us are. You do the best you can and you celebrate when you can celebrate, the big and the small. And just, be kind to yourself. Take care of yourself. Very good.
Mm-hmm. Be a good friend to yourself.
Yes, we're better friends sometimes to the people around us than we are to ourselves. That's crazy, but
Mm-hmm.
true in a lot of cases. So, all right, so let's move on to our noble character acknowledgement. This is basically, for those of you that don't know, where we acknowledge other women that are, blazing a trail, being an example, to those that are around them in their communities, on their jobs, in their families. And usually we try to connect it to whatever topic we're talking about today. So when we have special guests, we like to ask them to present their noble character for the week. And so we'll ask you, Stephanie, who is your noble character for today?
Yes. So my noble character is Dr. Nita Phillips. She's an amazing woman. I'll actually read a little snippet about her.
Please.
Um, so Dr. Nita has spent her career blending faith with individual and group therapy for a wide range of issues, including depression, anxiety, grief, addiction, and child and sexual abuse. She holds a
Mm,
master's in clinical social work from the University of Maryland. She has a PhD in counseling, education, and supervision from the Regent University School of Psychology and Counseling, and she completed a postdoctoral fellowship at Johns Hopkins School
mm,
of Public Health. She's co-authored several papers, including those in the Public Health Reports and the Journal of Healthcare for the Poor and Underserved. She currently leads the Master of Arts in Professional Counseling degree program at the Maryland campus of Lancaster Bible College. And what I really like about Dr. Nita is that she really works on the notion of blending therapy, faith, wellness, and Christ.
amen.
I don't find that a lot, both in the faith community as well as in the mental health community.
Yeah.
So I think she does a really good job of serving women who are at this intersection, right, of health, faith, culture, family, whatever that is.
Mhm.
And she runs an amazing podcast called In the Light. And so I highly suggest everyone check that out. I like to listen to it just, as I'm walking or what have you. So if you're looking for another mental wellness tool, I would suggest checking her out. I think she's an amazing woman of God and a noble character, and that she demonstrates what it looks like to overcome mental wellness challenges, but doing so in a way that honors God and meets us right in the culture and the timeliness that we're in.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you for that noble character acknowledgement. Dr. Nita Phillips, you are a woman of noble character. Love it, love it, love it. All right, so this week's BE challenge. Well, last week we asked everyone to identify another stream of income and research what you need to do to get started. Just as a reminder, you can still hop on that. We got time. And then this week's BE challenge is to identify and implement one tool or resource or tip to develop your mental and emotional wellness. But yeah, to identify your mental and emotional wellness. So to improve it. And so take a step this week. We got a lot of great tips and tools and suggestions that were shared. So hop on it, take advantage of it. All right. Next week, we're actually going to be talking about infertility and the journey to motherhood. So let me say that again: infertility and the journey to motherhood. You don't want to miss it. In the meanwhile, you can subscribe to our podcast on the podcast app. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Becoming Eva Today. You can also follow us on Facebook at Becoming Eva. That's one word. And you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Becoming Eva Today. That's all. Thank y'all so much. Have a great day.